The storm was a dark bruise across the sky, thick clouds swelling and churning as if the heavens themselves were about to break open. The air was heavy, the wind picking up, sending trees into uneasy whispers. At the center of camp, a cluster of volunteers stood near the main lodge, their faces illuminated by the dim, flickering glow of a lantern. The atmosphere was tense, crackling with the anticipation of the storm's arrival. "All right, everyone," Camp Director Larson barked, his gravelly voice cutting through the wind. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with an iron resolve that matched his clenched jaw. His gaze scanned the group of staff, the ones who had been running the camp for years. They were seasoned, confident, used to the chaos of these summer storms. Then his eyes fell on her. Emma. She stood at the back of the group, her hands tucked awkwardly into the front pocket of her oversized hoodie. She was new, so new in fact that she had barely settled in. She had spent the past hour being ignored by everyone, quietly tying up loose ends. But something about the storm felt different to her. She could feel the tension in the air, a kind of unease that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She had been working on emergency preparedness back home. Couldn't they at least listen to her? "Larson," Emma said, her voice tentative but determined, stepping forward just a fraction of an inch. Larson's eyes narrowed, his expression hardening as he fixed his gaze on her. "Yes, Emma? I think it's important we reinforce the tents. There's a chance the wind could gust up to 50 miles an hour. It could tear down the equipment, especially the old shelters near the south field. If we don't act now, we'll lose everything." A nervous ripple went through the group. Some staff members exchanged glances, others shifted uncomfortably in place. Emma could feel the weight of their collective skepticism pressing down on her. Larson's lip curled slightly, but it wasn't a smile. It was the kind of sneer that came from dismissing someone as inconsequential. "We're fine, Emma," he said, the condescension dripping off his words. "This storm isn't anything we haven't seen before. And as for the tents, well, it's your first day. Why don't you leave the actual planning to the people who've been here longer?" The group laughed. It was a low, dismissive sound, like a collective eye roll disguised as a chuckle. Emma's face flushed. The laughter felt like it was aimed directly at her. But she didn't retreat. Not this time. She knew what she was talking about. I understand, but with all due respect," Emma stammered, trying to hold on to her composure. "I've worked in disaster response before. I've seen what winds like these can do. If we wait..." Larson cut her off, his tone turning sharp and louder to reassert his control. "Enough. I don't need a rookie telling me how to run my camp. You're here to assist, not to second-guess my judgment." The laughter grew louder now, a ripple of amusement, some even snickering behind their hands. Maggie, a seasoned counselor, shot Emma a look that said everything without words. Her eyes narrowed, and her lips twisted into a sarcastic smile. "Yeah, Emma," Maggie chimed in. "You're so prepared. Maybe you should head to the south field all by yourself. I'm sure you'll have the tents up and safe in no time." A few of the others joined in, nodding with exaggerated seriousness. "Yeah, Emma, go save the day," Jake said, the camp's charming, older counselor, who had always been quick to make Emma the butt of jokes. His voice oozed mockery, but to the group it was just harmless fun. To Emma it was a stab in the chest. Larson didn't seem to notice or care. He turned away from her, dismissing her completely. "We'll be fine," he muttered, already moving toward the campfire to finish the evening's briefing with the rest of the team. "Focus on your assigned duties." Emma stood there, staring at the back of Larson's retreating form, her heart hammering in her chest. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Her shoulders slumped, and the harsh laughter still echoed in her ears, the sound of rejection wrapping around her like a heavy blanket. "Hey!" A voice broke through the haze of her humiliation. Maggie had sidled up to her, her tone dripping with feigned sympathy. "Look, I get it. You're new. I was too once. But maybe you should just leave the real work to the rest of us. Okay? We've got it covered." Maggie's eyes flicked toward the group, who were all pretending to ignore the scene, but couldn't quite hide the smirks creeping onto their faces. Emma opened her mouth again, this time to speak, to defend herself, but she could only find silence. There was nothing she could say that would make them listen. Not now. You know, Emma, Maggie continued, leaning in with a fake, overly sweet smile. You don't want to be that volunteer who just stands around being extra. It's not a good look. She laughed lightly, as if they were sharing a private joke. Emma wanted to argue. She wanted to tell them she wasn't extra. She was good. She knew what she was doing. But every word felt like it would be swallowed by the weight of their dismissal. Every step she took toward the group felt like she was sinking deeper into quicksand. A sharp crack of thunder broke the moment, and the wind whipped through the trees, rustling the leaves like a warning. Larson, sensing the storm was about to hit full force, barked another order. Everyone get to your posts. We need to be ready for this. But Emma didn't move. She stood frozen in place, her eyes staring at the group as they dispersed, going about their duties, leaving her behind. The only sound was the increasing wind and the distant rumble of the storm as it began to roll in. The storm was coming, and Emma was just standing there. The days that followed felt like an endless series of small defeats. Emma had hoped that the first night, the storm would be a fluke, a one-time misjudgment. But as the hours passed, it became clear to her that her position at the camp was precarious at best. She wasn't just the new volunteer. She was the outsider, the one everyone quietly agreed had no place among the seasoned staff. She watched the others with the practiced eyes of someone who was trying to fit in, trying to understand their rhythms, their roles. Larson ran the camp with a heavy hand, and most of the staff followed his example, taking everything in stride. But Emma felt like she was always playing catch-up. Never quite quick enough, never quite competent enough, always a step behind. It was supposed to be a summer of new beginnings. But instead, Emma found herself repeating the same old refrain in her head. You don't belong here. One afternoon, she was assigned to help with meal prep in the camp kitchen. It seemed like a harmless task, but it was the perfect microcosm of everything wrong in Emma's new life at the camp. The kitchen buzzed with frantic energy as everyone tried to keep up with the dozens of campers. Despite the organized chaos, Maggie had taken it upon herself to lead the kitchen team, and her interactions with Emma were nothing short of condescending. Maggie, Emma ventured tentatively, standing at the counter with her hands hovering over the vegetables that needed chopping. I think we might want to start with the salads first. If the storm gets any worse, we won't be able to use the outdoor grill. Maggie didn't even look up from the cutting board. Why don't you leave the thinking to the ones with the experience, Emma? She said, her voice light, but the words sliced through Emma like a blade. We've got a system here. No need to stir the pot. Literally. Maggie chuckled, but the other counselors shared a brief, quiet laugh with her. The humiliation came quick and sharp, but Emma held her ground. She glanced at the table, then back at Maggie, her face a mixture of frustration and resignation. But she said nothing, just nodded quietly and began chopping the vegetables. She worked with mechanical efficiency, doing her best to stay focused and avoid meeting anyone's eyes. The hours dragged by, and Emma was left feeling more like an invisible part of the background than ever. She had never felt so useless in her life. Later that afternoon, as the campers finished their activities and the sun dipped below the horizon, Emma found herself standing near the mess hall, staring out over the campgrounds. The air was still thick with humidity, and the sky was bruised with the promise of another storm. She was supposed to be part of the group, part of the staff who made the camp run smoothly. But instead, she felt like an imposter. A girl playing dress-up, trying to fit into clothes that were never hers to wear. She had arrived eager to contribute, convinced that her skills could make a difference. But it felt as if every time she opened her mouth, every time she made a suggestion, the others found new ways to shut her down, to remind her that she didn't belong. The sharp sounds of laughter echoed from the mess hall, the campers singing camp songs, while the staff congregated by the fire pit. Their conversations were loud, boisterous, and full of camaraderie. Emma stood at the edge of it all, her hands nervously twisting the hem of her shirt. The wind picked up again, sending a chill through the air. It made her shiver, But it wasn't just the cold. She felt the weight of loneliness pressing down on her, a suffocating blanket that seemed to follow her wherever she went. Emma. She whipped around at the sound of her name. It was Jake, the camp's older counselor with a smile that never seemed to fade, though it was rarely genuine. He stood with a small group of the more experienced staff members, leaning against a picnic table with the ease of someone who had claimed their place long ago. "You're standing all alone out here," he said, his voice soft but laced with mockery. "Don't want to come join the rest of us?" "I'm fine," Emma answered quickly, too quickly, her cheeks burning with the subtle humiliation of being noticed when she tried so hard to blend in. She forced a tight smile, though it felt hollow. Jake leaned in, and his eyes flashed with that sharp, unsettling edge of superiority. "You know, it's okay to just admit that you're out of your league," he said, his voice low, but loud enough for the others to overhear. "Not everyone's cut out for this job, you know? Some people just don't have what it takes." A few of the others snickered, and Emma felt the sting of their laughter. They didn't understand. They didn't care to understand. "I'm just trying to do my part," she said, her voice shaky but firm. Jake's lips quirked into that almost too polite smile. "Yeah, but you're not exactly helping, are you?" And with that, they left her standing there, alone once again. As the days wore on, Emma's patience wore thin. Every task was a reminder that she was an outsider, that her presence was unnecessary. Maggie continued to take every opportunity to belittle her, making offhand comments, dismissing her input, as if Emma's ideas were nothing but distractions. Larson's curt, distracted attitude did nothing to ease her discomfort. She tried to stay positive, tried to convince herself that her time would come, that she would prove herself. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that it was already too late. The breaking point came one evening when Emma was assigned to supervise a group of campers during a nature walk. She was excited at first, hopeful that this would be her chance to show she could handle something more than the mundane chores she had been given. But as the group made its way through the wooded trails, something felt wrong. Emma couldn't quite put her finger on it, just a shift in the air, a subtle change in the wind that made the leaves rustle uneasily. She stopped, her instincts screaming at her. The campers were a few yards ahead, laughing and chatting, but she felt something was off. She stepped forward, looking around. Then she saw it. A storm was approaching, a real one this time. The dark clouds were moving in quickly, faster than the last time. And the wind was picking up again, swirling and building, faster than before. Her heart dropped. The nature walk was taking them too far out into the woods. If the storm hit before they made it back to camp, they would be trapped. Emma's pulse quickened. She needed to act. But before she could call out to the group, she heard Larson's voice from behind her. "Everything's fine, Emma. Just keep the kids on the trail. You're just overthinking it." Emma's blood ran cold. She wanted to shout, to tell him that it wasn't fine, that the storm was coming. But instead, she closed her mouth. She couldn't seem to get the words out. And in that moment, she realized something. No matter how hard she tried, no one was going to listen to her. Not until it was too late. The wind howled through the trees, a deep, primal roar that made the hairs on Emma's neck stand up. It was no longer a distant threat. The storm was here, an unstoppable force crashing over the camp with relentless fury. The skies had turned black, the air thick with tension. The once lush woods surrounding the camp were now shrouded in darkness and swirling gusts, and the camp was on the verge of chaos. Emma's pulse pounded in her ears as she raced to the central lodge, her legs moving faster than they had in days. She was supposed to be working with the others, but she couldn't focus on mundane tasks when the storm was bearing down on them like a beast. She knew this kind of weather, had seen it before in her disaster response training, had felt its cold, jagged breath on her skin. As she burst through the door of the lodge, she was met by Larson's frantic, barked orders. The camp staff were scrambling, everyone in a panic. A few had started evacuating campers to safer buildings, but the real threat, the fire, hadn't even crossed their minds yet. "Larson," Emma called out, breathless as she stepped forward. He turned to face her, his face pale, his hair wet from the downpour. He looked strained, vulnerable for once. "What is it, Emma?" "Not now. We need to get the kids to safety." But Emma didn't back down. Her gut was screaming at her, her instincts sharper now than ever before. The wind, the humidity, the dry forest. This storm is going to spark a wildfire. We need to evacuate the kids now before the fire starts. Larson's jaw tightened, his brows furrowing in irritation. "We don't have time for. I've worked with fires like this before," Emma insisted, stepping closer, desperate to make him understand. "We have to get to the south field. The wind is already pushing in that direction, and if we don't move fast, we're going to be trapped. You can't wait for this to blow over. Please, I'm telling you, this is serious." The moment hung between them, the silence heavy and tense, and Emma could feel the weight of the camp's survival resting on her shoulders. But Larson didn't move, his expression unreadable. Then, to her surprise, he turned toward the others, a barely audible curse slipping from his lips. "Fine. But you better be right, Emma." Relief surged through her chest as she turned on her heel and rushed toward the campers. She had been dismissed, belittled, and ignored for days. But now, in the face of real danger, Emma was the one who saw what the others couldn't. And with that, she led the way. The next few minutes felt like a blur. Emma moved with purpose, her feet pounding the wet ground as she rounded up the campers. The rain started to pour in sheets, the downpour turning the ground beneath them into a slippery, muddy mess. The wind whipped through the trees, bending branches like they were nothing. Emma's eyes darted around, constantly scanning the sky, the horizon, for any signs of the approaching fire. Her stomach churned with dread. The storm might have made the air feel cool, but it was only a matter of time before the dry forests would catch. She had seen this kind of danger before, seen the way a wildfire could move faster than you could run. As she ushered the children toward the evacuation site, her heart skipped a beat when she saw the smoke rising in the distance. The fire was already spreading. The fire came faster than anyone could have anticipated. By the time Emma and the campers reached the designated evacuation area, the smoke had already begun to choke the air. The flames were visible now, dancing just beyond the tree line, their orange glow flickering ominously in the murk of the storm. The roar of the fire mixed with the howling wind, a deafening, suffocating sound that rattled Emma's bones. "We have to move," Emma shouted, panic rising in her chest. The campers were crying, huddled together in a tight group. Larson was still barking orders, trying to coordinate the evacuation, but the chaos had only grown. The fire was getting closer by the second, and the wind was pushing it straight toward them. But then, the worst thing that could have happened. A group of younger campers, including one with severe asthma, had wandered off, lost in the confusion. Emma's heart seized in her chest. "Where are they?" Larson demanded, his voice high with panic. "We can't wait for them, we have to go now." "I'll find them," Emma said, her voice strong despite the fear that gnawed at her insides. "You take the rest. I'll go back. I'll find them." But Larson hesitated, his eyes flicking between Emma and the fire. Then, with a sharp nod, he handed her a walkie-talkie. "You have 15 minutes. After that, we're gone." Emma didn't wait for any more instructions. She darted back toward the thickening smoke, the wind screaming in her ears. The camp felt like it was collapsing in on itself, the sound of crackling flames growing louder as she pushed forward. "Anyone?" she shouted into the smoke, but her voice was lost in the chaos. She pushed deeper into the woods, her feet slipping on the wet ground as the fire crept closer. Her mind raced, 1,000 thoughts colliding with one another. She couldn't afford to lose anyone, not this time, not after everything. And then, through the thick smoke, she saw them. The group of campers was huddled together beneath a fallen tree, crying and shivering. The asthma-stricken boy, Eli, was having trouble breathing, his face pale and gasping for air. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She was running out of time. "Eli! Hey!" she called, running toward him. She knelt beside him, trying to keep him calm. "We need to go, buddy. We need to get you out of here." Emma pulled him into her arms, lifting him as best she could, but his body was limp and unresponsive. He was barely conscious. "Come on, Eli," she whispered, her voice frantic, but determined. "You can do this. We're gonna get you out of here. Just breathe. Just breathe." The fire was close now, too close. With one final push, Emma found a way back to the evacuation site, her steps heavy with exhaustion and fear. She moved through the smoke and the chaos, fighting the storm, the fire, and the panic rising inside her. And when she finally reached the others, her arms shaking with exhaustion, she collapsed to the ground, Eli safe in her arms. The camp was saved. The camp was safe, though scarred. The fire had been contained, and the evacuation was nearly complete. The remaining campers were huddled in safe areas, their faces pale but relieved. Emma, her face streaked with soot and rain, sat on the ground, breathing heavily as she tried to shake the adrenaline from her bones. She had done it. She had saved them all. And yet, the weight of her exhaustion was nothing compared to the swelling sense of pride that filled her chest. Larson approached her, his expression unreadable, but there was something different in his eyes. Respect, and a bit of awe. "Emma," he said, his voice quiet, his usual gruffness replaced by something softer. "You saved them. You saved us all." The staff gathered around her, and though they were tired, their faces were filled with gratitude. Maggie, standing at the edge of the group, stepped forward, her expression now more earnest than Emma had ever seen it. Maggie started, but the words faltered. She cleared her throat. "You were right, Emma. We should have listened to you." Emma didn't need to hear any more. She smiled, a tired but genuine smile. The recognition, finally, was there, and it felt better than she ever could have imagined. As the camp began to settle into recovery, Emma stood at the edge of the woods, looking out over the horizon. The storm had passed, and with it so had the doubts and dismissals. For the first time since arriving at the camp, she felt like she belonged. She wasn't extra anymore. She was essential. And as the sun set on the horizon, Emma knew that no matter what came next, she would always have a place in this camp. A place where she could truly make a difference.